Zoom is a great platform for meetings where all you need to do is try to approximate putting people face to face so that they can talk with each other. But when you're trying to recreate a classroom setting, there's really a lot that's left wanting. For example, one thing that I know I do all the time as a science teacher is a lot of visual graphic organizing, whether it's laying out a concept web on the board or just outlining notes. Especially when I'm working things out mathematically, you have to do that visually. And when it's just a face and a voice, that's really hard to do. So what I'm going to do right now is demonstrate a couple different ways of trying to recreate that teacher whiteboard way that you can be visual and expressive in organizing concepts visually and graphically as you can in a classroom. So what you're seeing right now is just the way it looks when you record a Zoom meeting where it's just a camera and a teacher. But next up, I'm going to show you something that's going to try to put a whiteboard within your reach. Well, now that I'm in a Zoom meeting, if I go down to the bottom here, I've got a share screen menu. Now, if I click on this, I've got a few options, and one of them is something called Whiteboard. Now, if I share here, all of a sudden, you'll see I'm up in the corner, and down there is a whiteboard. And you're able to use this to write. You're also able to use it to draw, but I'm using the trackpad, which is really painfully slow. If I were a bit faster with it, I don't know, it might be worth it. If you had some sort of, tactile input, some sort of, something like an artist would use, that would be a lot faster. Although that's not something that everybody has. At least that is an option. But this is good for quick graphics. I think I could make a Venn diagram without too much hassle, although the actual writing would be tricky. So that's where this comes in. Text, let's see, stamp, quick little symbols here. This is clearly nonsense, but the point is that you have a kind of automatic digital whiteboard in this that you can use. You can't do math with it because it's just text. However, you can, of course, approximate it. Anyway, so that's one way of being visual with your with your Zoom meeting, but there are others, and they might require something a bit more clever.
This next one is going to be a bit more complicated, but it's much more versatile. In order to do this, you're going to need just some old iPhone. It could be a new one, of course, but this is actually a spare. This is my father-in-law's old discarded iPhone that I've just been using for its camera. So if you connect this to your MacBook, just like so, then it can behave like an external camera for the MacBook. And in particular, if you open up QuickTime, then one of the things you can do in QuickTime is make a new movie recording. Now, in this little drop-down menu here, you're able to choose which camera it's recording from. If I choose the FaceTime HD camera, well, there you go. It's just showing me what the computer sees. However, going back down here, if you choose the iPhone, oh, of course, the phone went to sleep. It just shows you what the camera, what the phone sees. So, if you want to make the best use of this, you're going to want to have, well, the battery not be dead. You're going to want to have a camera, and it's helpful if you have a camera app that is very minimal. So, if I orient this landscape, there we go. This screen is going to look horizontal with me. And then, here's the real trick. If I put this off to the side, I just need some way to suspend the phone. I've heard some people talking about just stacking up soup cans. It doesn't have to be anything elaborate. This came out of a $5 bargain bin at Walmart. Now, this is just looking down at my desk. Let me just put it in a slightly better place. There we go. And now, looking at the screen, I have my desk now visible on my computer screen. All because I've opened up QuickTime, chosen a new movie recording, and under this menu, selected the iPhone. Okay, so what can I do with this? If I leave this here, let's say I want to work out some math problems for a class. I'm going to go ahead and open up Safari. One of the things that you're able to do in Safari, or any browser of course, is get a virtual calculator. If this calculator is sized up in the screen, look what I have here. I've got the desk visible here, and right next to it, a calculator. At this point, all I need is a piece of paper on the desk. The phone's looking down at it. It's on the left side of my computer screen, and there's a calculator on the right. So let me leave this camera in a place where it can get a good look at everything. I wish I could make that just a little bit lower without jostling everything. How's that? Yeah, that's better. Okay, so it's got a good look at everything. Let me go ahead and start my Zoom meeting now. Of course, I still have my face appearing here because that camera is still active. But now what I can do is share screen, and I have this option to share my desktop. If I share my desktop, here's what I have. I have the paper on the left. Remember, that's the paper on my desk, seen by this phone, being played in QuickTime. Then a calculator on the right. Looks like it could use a strategic resize so that it's not conflicting with my face. Okay, well, let's go ahead and record this meeting so we can see what it looks like to everyone attending.
I guess I'll just put this here then. Well, hello, unlucky math class. You have to do math today, and that's something that no one likes to do, right? Well, if I were to do some math, it might look like this. As you can see, it's clearly visible, clearly legible here on the screen. If I needed to do some sort of problem solving here, say I know that at this stage in the problem, it's time to take the square root of both sides, I can just actually perform that on the screen, just like I'm using this calculator. I think I need to make that, there we go. And just like you were working out this problem with a calculator at your desk or at your podium, the camera's lost focus. There we go, it's cleared up. Then you can see the answer has shown up. Now, I've done this with my physics class lately, and the feedback that I've gotten is this. One, of course, this showing the steps is absolutely vital because that's the step-by-step way that the problems are solved. Students want to see problems solved step by step. But when I'm doing numbers here and then all of a sudden an answer just comes out, it seems to come out of nowhere. And when it's being done in person on a board, it's not too much trouble to just move over a foot, work the problem out on the board, or have students in the room work it out on their calculator. When you're separated like this by remote, there's so much that happens that unless you're present in the room with it, you'll miss it. So making it as visible as possible is really necessary, and I can't think of a better way to do that than to just have a calculator on screen for the students to see. It's a stand-in for their own calculator in front of them, or you doing it on a board in front of them. The numbers don't come out of thin air. There's a reason for their existence. And I like this calculator. There's lots of them online. I like this one because it's vertical, and that kind of reflects how actual handheld scientific calculators tend to work. As always, I'm up here in the corner so that there is a face to attach to the voice. And this is a way that you could go through everything. Now, up here in the corner, up in this browser, you don't even need to have a calculator. This could be useful for other subjects as well. For example, depending on what class you were doing, There's no reason why you couldn't have the text of whatever you're reading over here. And that means that rather than doing math over here, you could be just taking whatever notes you would have been taking on your whiteboard. There is a lot of flexibility that we have on whiteboards that we don't have on paper. For example, the ability to quickly erase or make sudden corrections. There are stand-ins for that. For example, you can always throw post-it notes over things just in case you need some way to remember things. It's similar to how on large whiteboards you have like ones that you can slide back and forth. Basically, wherever your graphical landscape is, you can adapt to it and just use whatever there is in that environment. On paper, you have a completely different way of visually expressing yourself than you do on a whiteboard. But there is a benefit to this being on paper. I could just hole punch this and put it in a binder. And I have a record, like a physical record of my class notes, which then can be photocopied or scanned and made into packets for future years. And with this recorded as it is, there's the record of the teacher and the face and the voice. There is whatever resource was being referenced, whether it's necessary or not, and then the paper copy of the notes that were being done. Now, this is all very, very complex and can be kind of difficult looking or even overwhelming before you set it up. Why do this in the first place? Well, if I can't demonstrate why you might want to do it with it, then it's not really useful now, is it? So here's the goal of all of this trouble. When we're thinking about teaching in a classroom, we tend to have a kind of classroom environment. And the trouble with being remote is that we are out of that environment. We're kind of like, how shall we say, fish out of water. Sorry, I tried. That's another benefit of this, is you get to do all your visual gags if you're a joker like me. Anyway, since we're out of our natural environment, it means that our habits aren't paying off anymore. It means that the cognitive shortcuts that we've developed in order to not be overwhelmed or bored every single time we look at something, those shortcuts aren't designed for this environment. So either we need to adapt to our new environment, which takes a lot of work, or we can be humans and do what we always do and adapt our environment to us. So if you're accustomed to, or if your students are accustomed to taking certain visual cues in your classroom, what you can do is recreate those cues virtually. And that's what I'm attempting to do here, because when you're sitting in a chair at a table or in a desk in a classroom, there's usually a couple different places that you can look, and depending on the classroom itself, you're often looking at all of them one after the other in a class. For example, in a science class, it's not uncommon to have the periodic table of elements on the wall. And you want to be able to look at it during the course of the class while you're doing work? Well, you could have your students have their periodic table out in front of them while they're in class with you, or you could just put it on the wall or put it in front of them, just like I've done here. The whole thing isn't visible, but I can spotlight and focus where I want. And this way, everybody's looking at the same thing. I can use the cursor to draw attention to it. And whenever necessary, I'm able to put notes over here or just indicate graphically what I'm doing. So we have an environment that we're used to, we've been pulled out of, and we can try to change our environment to match the old one. It's almost like terraforming a new planet. So we're able to try to recreate our sensory environment. So our cognitive habits pay off. Now, as unusual as it is looking at a screen like this, this is the bare bones of what it is to be sitting in, say, a high school science classroom. There's the technical reference on the wall. There is the whiteboard where the teacher is organizing all of the main ideas. And then up there in the corner, there is the teacher, him or herself, just being the face of the class. The voice is connected to a face so that you can empathize with it and actually connect with it. And in this way, you are you're recreating that classroom environment as much as you can.